Greetings, friends around the world. This is Dr. Bob Thiel for the Bible News Prophecy channel. I want to speak about Donald Trump's prophetic presidency. Donald Trump has been in the news off and on much of his life, but particularly since he announced he was going to run for president of the United States. Now, Donald Trump's been U.S. president for a full year now, and what tends to happen about him is most people either like him or dislike him or whatever. I'm not going to go into that part, but I do want to go over are prophecies and predictions that you should be considering regarding U.S. President Donald Trump. I'm going to go over 18 things that I wrote prior to when Donald Trump became U.S. President and see what's been happening to confirm what I was telling people would happen should Donald Trump become the President of the United States, which he did become. Now, the first one was that Donald Trump would offend the Europeans. I wrote about that in December 20th, 2015. In 2016, I wrote, Donald Trump will take steps to upset the Europeans. And in June of 2016, I wrote, should Donald Trump become U.S. President, look for him to even more offend the Europeans. Well, has he? Well, certainly. There are many examples, but we've had to send U.S. Vice President Mike Pence over to Europe to try to reassure allies there. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson has done so. Various other ones have tried to do so. And other ones have tried to smooth over statements that Donald Trump has made. He's clearly offended Europeans. And the reason that matters from a biblical perspective is that the Bible talks about the United States, or our great power, being betrayed by friends in Lamentations 1, verses 1 through 2. And in Daniel chapter 11, verse 39, it talks about a European power taking over the power with the greatest military. In the 21st century, that is the United States. And Europeans are not going to do that unless they're offended. Now, Donald Trump isn't the only one who's ever offended the Europeans. I want to make that clear. But consistent with prophecy, he has. Now, the second item was Donald Trump's election would be used to further push European unity. Now, the Bible in Daniel chapter 2, verses 41 to 43, talks about Europe having unity problems, but that Europe will somehow be united. Now, interestingly, according to certain sources, the best response to Donald Trump was for Europeans to unify. Let me read something from February 2017. European Union leaders vowed to remain united and assert the bloc on the world stage in response to U.S. Donald Trump's criticism of the EU. The Europeans say, look, we're going to go together. We are going to be a bloc on the world stage. We are going to remain united against Donald Trump and whatever he's basically saying. And in May 28th of that year, we've got a report that from Martin Schulz, who's a German politician. Europe is the answer. Closer European coordination or cooperation on all fronts is the answer to Donald Trump. Above all, we cannot allow ourselves to be subjugated to Trump's policies. And Schulz was actually the president of the European Parliament from 2012 to 2017. And he said that European nations needed to have a decisive approach to deal with Donald Trump. And I believe that this is going to lead to the prophesied King of the North that we read about in Daniel chapter 11. Now, interestingly, the day after Donald Trump was elected in November of 2016, the EU Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker sent out a tweet over Twitter that said, Trump wins. Wake-up call for Europe to further unite and take charge of its own destiny. Now, how did I know Donald Trump could trigger this? Because the Bible shows in Revelation 13, 1 through 10, that Europe is going to rise up again. In Daniel 11:25, that it's going to have a great army, and it one day defeat a power like the United States in Daniel 11, verse 39. And because of where we are in God's plan, God's got a 6,000-year plan followed by the 1,000-year millennial reign. Where we are in that plan and the timing of Donald Trump's election, I was convinced that this would be Europe's reaction should he win, and it was so. Now, the third thing that I warned about was we would see increased civil unrest come to the United States. Now, I wrote about this prior to Donald Trump. I wrote it back, like say, August 7th, 2011, for example. But I also wrote about it specifically to do with Donald Trump. For example, on September 5th, 2016, I've commented about civil unrest, and we've seen some. I said, but the media certainly fanned the flames in the past, and I expect them to do more such fanning in the future if Donald Trump should win. And of course, Donald Trump did win, and the media has been doing that. Furthermore, we've seen groups like Antifa or Antifa, depending on how you want to pronounce it, encouraging violent overthrows, demonstrations against Donald Trump. Some say that they don't want to be violent, but we've seen violence. And overall, the media has tended to support this. And I wrote this because the Bible warns that there will be terror within in Deuteronomy 32, verse 25. And I believe that the mainstream media has been provoking some of that. Now, I'm not excusing Donald Trump's statements that are not always accurate, but the mainstream media has been supportive of the idea of protests and civil unrest regarding Donald Trump. Now, the fourth one is that I've warned that Donald Trump's rise would encourage the Europeans to arm. And I've been saying that for a long time. And right after he won, I'm going to read something. Donald Trump's election victory, along with Brexit in the UK, will speed up the plans for a European army, according to Germany's defense minister, Ursula von der Leyen. And I mentioned Jean-Claude Juncker before, and on the 10th of November 2016, it's reported, Europe should build its own army and not rely on security guarantees from Washington, the European Commission president said, following the election of Donald Trump. He said we need more security in Europe, and I don't just mean for the anti-terror fight. We need a European community of defense. We need it now. The idea that the Americans will eternally see to European security is not true. Independent of this, Americans will not see to Europe's security forever. He said, even if Trump didn't win, at some point in time, we the Europeans aren't going to be taken care of by America this way. He says, we have to do it ourselves. That's why we need a new approach to the European community of defense, including a European army. And I mentioned before, Daniel 11:25 talks about Europe having a great army, and it's something they're working towards. In December 2017, 25 of the 28 European Union countries agreed to something called PESCO, which is the Permanent Structured Cooperation. It's a military pact. There are 28 nations in the EU, 25 agreed to it. The UK is going out, they didn't agree. Small island called Malta didn't agree, or isn't in it yet, maybe they'll change, and Denmark. But basically, we've got the Europeans deciding they're going to get together on their own defense. Now, kind of related to the fourth one, the fifth one I wrote was related to Germany, that Germany would want a stronger military. Now, that's partially based on Isaiah 10:5 through 12. And by the way, I'm not going to go through as many scriptures as I normally do, because I'm going through so many points on this, but I've linked, I will link an article to this particular YouTube, so you can go there and get some details, because I'm not going to read every word that I've written on here. I've got more than covered in a relatively short message here. But anyway, based on Isaiah 10:5 through 12, it talks about a Germanic influenced power taking over places, which in the end time would include the United States. The day before Donald Trump's election, I posted the following. If Donald Trump is elected, the Germans will see this as proof they cannot rely on the USA for their defense. Germany will push for a European army. Some in Europe actually want Donald Trump to win for this basic reason. Now, was this confirmed? Yes. I mentioned the German defense minister did this right after the election. But here's an interesting headline from Karl Gutenberg, who's a former defense minister of Germany. There will be a terrible awakening for Europe. And actually the Bible says what's going to happen in Europe will be terrible. But in a survey of December 2016, a month after the election, found the majority of Germans wanted to build a formidable European army. And in 2017, German Chancellor Angela Merkel said Europe should no longer be naive and rely on others for defense, meaning the United States. So that was confirmed. Sixth thing, I warned that Donald Trump's views on climate change would cause problems with Europe. And that happened. When Donald Trump announced that he was not going to be part of the Paris Accords, he wanted to renegotiate them or pull out. This upset everybody. Here's a headline, we lost a major ally when this occurred. Then he pulled out, And now here's a news item from the German press. It says, just as Trump demonstrated a lack of knowledge, negotiating skills, and general competency in the dramatic failure of Trump Care, so too will this executive order to pull out of the Paris Accord, Climate Accords, act to undermine his administration. China and European Union will now have to take the lead as they've already been doing. And here's something from Richard N. Haas, who's on the Council of Foreign Relations. It's a tweet. Merkel saying Europe cannot rely on others and need to take matters in own hands is a watershed in what the U.S. has sought to avoid since World War II. This was done in reaction to Donald Trump's position on climate change. A separation between the United States and Europe is going on. Seventh, I wrote that Donald Trump will be one that is involved in fulfilling 2 Timothy 3, 1 through 5. Now this I am going to read. We're living in perilous times. Now Donald Trump's not the only one who helps fulfill this, but let me just read this, starting verse 1. I'm going to go through verse 7. But know this, that in the last days perilous times will come. For men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, without self-control, brutal, despisers of good, traitors, headstrong, haughty, lovers of pleasures rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power. And from such people turn away. For of this sort are those who creep into households and make captives of gullible women, loaded down with sins, led away by various lusts, always learning and never coming to the knowledge of truth. Well, proud, boasters, lovers themselves, lovers of money. Sounds like Donald Trump. He doesn't seem to value his word. There's a headline from April 29, 2017 that says, Trump broke 80 promises in 100 days. Then I saw one from 2 days ago, January 18, 2018. Donald Trump averages 5 lies per day, some parties claiming. Now, that probably an exaggeration, but whether he broke over 80 promises or told over 1,000 lies, Donald Trump has made many inaccurate statements and he doesn't want to be held properly accountable for them. Before going any further, let me say that some Protestants have claimed that Donald Trump is the Trump of God and that his name is related to 1 Thessalonians 4 or 1 Corinthians 11, and that's simply not the case. Some claim that Trump will be the one God is going to use to call Christians to meet with Jesus, and I do not believe that. The eighth one is that debt will increase under Donald Trump. I wrote about that. I warned about that in a couple different places. According to the U.S. Treasury, the debt of the United States as of the 19th of January 2017, prior to Donald Trump taking office, to the penny is $429,217,106.77. Now, as of the 18th of January 2018, the latest data that was at the U.S. Treasury Department when I checked today, there's also a government shutdown that we've got here in place temporarily, we'll see, was $20,493,420,765,319.99 according to the U.S. Treasury. Debt is rising as I warned it would. The ninth thing I warned is that Donald Trump might propose a peace deal consistent with Daniel 9:27. Let me just read the first part of that. Then he will confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he'll bring an end to the sacrifice and offering. And I won't read the rest, but basically this is talking about a 7-year deal involving the Middle East. We've got other information on that you can read about, and this deal is going to be broken. Well, Donald Trump proposed a peace idea. He says, we'll start a process that will hopefully lead to peace. I've heard perhaps that the toughest deal to make is between Israelis and Palestinians. Let's see if we can prove them wrong. He consulted with several leaders in the Arab world to try to do that. Now, while what Donald Trump proposed was not the deal yet of Daniel 9:27, I said he would propose something consistent with this, and he's already done this. Number 10 is I warned that Donald Trump is supportive of ecumenical unity. And the Bible warns about this in the end times, specifically in Revelation chapter 17. And I'm going to read a couple of things from Donald Trump. He had a trip planned to go to Europe, and he was going to meet with supposedly the tour of the world's 3 great religions. He announced that. And then Donald Trump says, tolerance is a cornerstone of peace, and that's why I'm proud to make a major and historic announcement this morning to share with you. My first foreign trip as President of the United States will be to Saudi Arabia, then Israel, then the place that my cardinals love very much, Rome. So it seems to me a pretty ecumenical movement, that support of that movement that he has, and that's consistent with what I warned, because I believe that we're going to see more ecumenical unity, which the Bible warns against. Number 11 is going to sound kind of easy. People are going to call for Donald Trump's impeachment. Now, this was based upon not only political observation, but Jesus' comments in Mark 3:25 about a house being divided against itself won't stand, as well as prophecies about the United States. Interestingly, or oddly, in May of 2017, the Los Angeles City Council passed a resolution calling for investigation in Congress on whether or not Donald Trump has committed an impeachable offense, and I don't recall quite things like that in the past. We've also got situations with when James Comey got fired, that the people called for impeachment then. But even something from a couple of days ago, this is from the 17th of January 2018, a House Democrat who forced a vote to impeach Donald Trump last month, which ended in defeat, vowed on Wednesday to introduce articles of impeachment many more times. I refuse to accept what the president is doing. I refuse to accept it. If you tolerate something, you will not change it, said Texas Representative Al Green on the House floor. I'm going to do everything I can to change it, and it's within my power as a member of Congress of the United States to bring articles of impeachment against this president for what he's done. So this has happened, and more than it does with other presidents. I realize with other U.S. presidents, somebody's always talking about impeachment, but as far as Congress, being introduced this often, and a city council wanting this to be done, that's unprecedented. Number 12, Donald Trump would encourage the rise of the final king of the South of biblical prophecy, a power that involves people of the Middle East and North Africa. I do want to read this from the Bible because some people are not familiar with the king of the South. So we're going to go to Daniel chapter 11, starting in verse 40. So when the time comes to the end, I'm reading this from the New Jerusalem Bible. The king of the South will try conclusions with him, but the king of the North will come storming down on him with chariots and cavalry and a large fleet. He will invade countries, overrun them, and drive on. He will invade the land of splendor, and many will fall. But Edom, Moab, and what remains of the sons of Ammon will escape him. He'll reach out to attack countries. Egypt will not escape him. The gold and silver and treasures, all valuable of Egypt, will be in his power. Libyans and Cushites will be at his feet. We're talking about peoples of North Africa and the Middle East. And Donald Trump has been working on this type of a thing. Here's something from May of 2017. President Trump says the United States seeks a coalition of nations in the Middle East. He was speaking in front of an audience of leaders from Arab and Muslim majority nations. He said the United States will support you in doing this. So Donald Trump, like others, supports the idea of having essentially a Muslim confederation of Muslim nations in the Middle East and North Africa, like we just read about in Daniel chapter 11, to get together. Number 13, the rise of Donald Trump will confirm to various ones that the USA is in decline. According to Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 7, the time of Jacob's trouble is coming, and that's going to affect the United States. According to Jesus in Luke 21:24, final time of the Gentiles will be upon us, and that will happen with the decline of the United States. There was a survey that I saw January 18th, 2018. It says global confidence in U.S. leadership is falling to a new low. A survey of opinion of 134 countries showed a record collapse in approval of the U.S. role in the world, from 48% under Obama to 30% 1 year after Donald Trump, the lowest level Gallup has recorded since beginning its global leadership poll a decade ago. Germany is now seen as a global leader by many more people, at 41%. So we've seen that the leadership role of the United States in the world has diminished since Donald Trump became U.S. president. Now, number 14 ties into some Protestants have alluded to, and that is that daily sacrifices will resume in Jerusalem. But for those the Bible says in places such as Daniel 11:31 and Daniel 9:27 that the sacrifices are going to stop. Well, for them to stop, they have to start. Some believe that Donald Trump's announcement related to Jerusalem, December 6, 2017, is going to lead to that. And that he's like the Cyrus of Isaiah 44 and 45. While Donald Trump is apocalyptic, I don't believe he's specifically Cyrus. But that being said, animal sacrifices will again happen in Jerusalem prior to the start of the Great Tribulation, and one way or the other, steps that Donald Trump has said or will take or has taken are going to end up, ultimately we're going to end up seeing animal sacrifices no matter what Donald Trump does about it. Number 15, I said Donald Trump would support increased government surveillance. I can go into where I said that, but on the 18th of January 2018, the Senate on Thursday gave the Trump administration and national security hawks a significant victory, approving a long-term extension of controversial surveillance programs over bipartisan objections. And the bill was signed by Donald Trump yesterday, which is the 19th of January 2018. So he's still doing surveillance, which I consider, from a U.S. perspective, somewhat unconstitutional, but whatever. With that, number 16, Donald Trump's administration would focus too much on China and not consider the military threat that Europe poses. I've warned about this. I mentioned earlier that in Lamentations 1 and 2, it talks about friends betraying a power at the time of the end. Europe is considered a friend of the United States, much more so than places like Russia or China. I'd like to read something that was in the news January 19, 2018. U.S. military advantage over Russia and China is eroding, according to a document from the Pentagon's new defense strategy, unveiled by Defense Secretary Jim Mattis. And he says that we need to focus on China and Russia. These nations seek to put together a world consistent with their authoritarian views. And they also mentioned nations such as North Korea and Iran, but not any concern about Europe. And that's something that's going to happen. People don't believe this. They think the Europeans will never be capable. They think the Europeans won't do this. They think the Europeans are friends. This is something that the mainstream media is missing all the time. When they, despite the fact they talk about Donald Trump, pro or con, mostly con, around, they skip many prophetic ramifications of what's going on. Number 17, I wrote that Donald Trump's position on the Trans-Pacific Partnership would assist China. That was also in the news again yesterday. Let me just read something. As America withdraws, China's global influence is growing. The Premier of China has dispatched his trade negotiators to help formulate a new Asian trade pact in the wake of TPP. That's the Trans-Pacific Partnership that Donald Trump pulled out of. So far, I've gone through 17 things that I specifically warned would happen if Donald Trump became President of the United States. Now, the 18th, I didn't connect with Donald Trump, because I wrote this back in 2008. I wrote that the EU will decide that Mexico and the rest of Latin America are more in agreement with it and make some type of serious trade agreement with most or all of Latin America. And the Vatican will also have influence in Latin America. Well, now we have a Pope who's from Latin America. We never had one of those before. But the European Union and Mexico have had various trade talks. They accelerated them, according to the news, to deepen because of U.S. President Donald Trump. We've also seen other aspects of the Europeans trying to make deals with Latin America because of this. Europe is trying to fill in areas where Donald Trump indicates he wants to change trade terms. The Bible foretells that at the end of the United States, in places such as Daniel 11:39, along with the major international trading power in Europe. You can read about that in Revelation 18. That's why I read about the Mexicans and the Europeans with this. Now, having gone through all these things, I'm not trying to say that Donald Trump's the worst president than the last one. I wrote things about Barack Obama. Or his political opponents would have been better or worse. But those with ears to hear, as it says and eyes to see, as it says in Proverbs 20, verse 10, should understand that properly understood biblical prophecies are coming to pass. As I've said before, I'm going to quote 2 Peter 1, verse 19 from the King James Version. We in the continuing church of God have, quote, have also a more sure word of prophecy, whereunto you would do well to take heed, as unto a light that shines in a dark place, unto the day dawn, and a day star shall rise in your heart. We have a news media that ignores prophecy or basically doesn't care for it, or if they do bring it up, they like to make fun of it mostly. We have a culture that the Bible's not respected as much as it should be. We've got people basically been turned off about prophecy, even though the Apostle Paul in 1 Thessalonians 5:20 said, "Do not despise prophecy." Now Jesus said in Mark 13 verse 37, "What I say to you all, watch." As we get closer to the Great Tribulation that Jesus mentioned in Matthew 24:21, this is definitely a time to watch and take heed of what's going on with prophecy. As far as U.S. President Donald Trump, he's the leader of the most powerful military in the world because of where we are in God's plan prior to the millennium. So by virtue of his timing, I knew he was going to have to fulfill or work toward or have things that will lead toward the fulfillment of various biblical prophecies. I've gone through 18 things that I wrote about Donald Trump prior to him becoming a U.S. president that have begun to come to pass. Properly understood biblical prophecies are coming to pass and will come to pass. Put your faith in God and in His Word. This is Dr. Bob Thiel for the Bible News Prophecy Channel.